got out of college, I worked for a big car photographer who is much like an internship, as an assistant, sweeping floors and working my way up to eventually being able to handle a camera and lights, until eventually I was something of a partner of his, and before we finally had a falling out because we were both competing for the same work. But yeah, other than that, I've always been freelance, always.
And there was a period, I mean, we're going back now probably 10 years. You'd been around off-road racing. We're going to shift gears here now because listeners that don't know, Boyd Jaynes is pretty famous in the world of vintage Baja racing. He's known at it's Caballo Diablo, right?
Caballo del Diablo.
Tell us about vintage Bronco racing.
You speak Spanish, Ryan. You should know how to say the horse of the devil. Well, it's funny, when I first got that thing, we named it El Diablo Caballo, and it was corrected by so many people down there that we ended up having to change it on the second year because I was just embarrassed, spelt wrong.
Oh, that's lame. I think you should have kept it however you wanted it to.
So the Caballo del Diablo is a 1968 Bronco. I bought it in 2009 with another gentleman, Bill Brindle.
Good buddy of ours, yeah.
Yep. Bill and I both heard about the Nora Mexican 1000, and both of us being kind of extraneous people within the off-road motorsports community, we thought it might be a perfect opportunity to finally participate in an event. It sounded like something that was attainable for us, and we immediately thought about, well, let's find an cool old Bronco. And at the time, Broncos were less than popular, and so they were easy to buy cheap.
Which is astounding how it's changed in the last decade or so.
Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. So we were lucky to get that thing for cheap, and ended up racing it the first Nora in 2010, and here we are 10 years later. We've raced every single Nora. Bill was my partner for a couple of years, and for the last 8 years, Brian Godfrey has been my partner, and him and I split the driving and navigating, and also the marketing, and also the mechanical, the wrenching, and the non-stop maintenance that goes with both having an actual race car and trying to run a team. And we're, it's something of a business endeavor these days as well. So, there's a lot of work involved with it. And
Boyd's not bragging at this point, so I'll do it for him. But you guys have won, is it 7 out of the 10 races you guys have been in?
That's correct.
Not bad, 70%. What would that be in a batting average? 700? That's pretty damn good.
I don't know anything about baseball.
Me neither, actually. I'm just pretending.
Yeah, you're just pretending.
Yeah.
Sounds good. 700 sounds good.
But it's again, those that do know Boyd, maybe this is cool getting to see or have been around him in the races, getting to hear other parts of his life. Those that don't know Boyd and or Brian, you've got to envision, yes, they're serious about their racing, but it's not without some flamboyance, if that's the right word. They've embraced the Hispanic culture and have driving suits that are custom made to look like mariachi uniforms. And when they don't have their helmets on, they're wearing big sombreros. Or is there an actual name for the sombrero or for the hat that the mariachis wear?
I don't know. I'm
Shame
guessing,
on me for not knowing, and you for that matter.
I was going to say, if you're asking me, certainly I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's kind of universal that a sombrero is a sombrero. Right?
Well, I mean, there's a like a caballero sombrero, more of a cowboy hat, and that's a lot different than a cowboy, I think. And we could sound like idiots right now for sure. But I will say, I was in Guadalajara one time. This is 15 years ago, and it just happened to be a week-long celebration of the mariachi. And so it was a week's worth, I believe, of concerts that were happening. They were happening everywhere, but there's a competition that I believe happens like in the main civic center or something. But every restaurant you went to, street corners, and it was mariachi bands of every make and color and style you could imagine. I mean, it was little kids, women, gay guy. I mean, it was everything. It was in massive groups of mariachis, and then small 1- and 2-band shows, and it was pretty cool to be there during that time. but clearly there's more to learn, because I don't know if their hats actually have a special name or not. Shame on us.
I don't know either. They actually have a battle of the mariachis in San Juan Capistrano.
Oh yeah.
And I have never been. Embarrassingly enough, at least in the last 10 years, I should have made an effort to go. Being that I dress
especially
up.
that you're posing as one.
That's
when you go race.
Make one every April. It's funny. There was some certain corporate people at SEMA who didn't find it funny that we put a mannequin with our driving suit next to the Bronco in their booth. Found it a little culturally insensitive. We had to take it down halfway through SEMA.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah,
it's a bummer just because I know. I mean, however it could appear. I know you well enough to know that there's a tremendous amount of respect for. The country of Mexico, the states of Baja, and more importantly, the people of Baja. So,
100%. In our thought process in doing that, it was really homage to them and to their celebrating what they what is a symbol of having fun. A mariachi band is something you have at every party, every fancy dinner, or on the street corner when you've been having fun and partying. A mariachi band just makes it even better.
Yeah.
So for us, we wanted to roll up into town from racing out in the dirt roads and jump out of the truck wearing a mariachi outfit was really a salute to them.
Yeah. Well, so you kind of hinted on something, and I'd like to think we have racing fanatics or people that are interested in racing listening sometimes. You dove into this thing 10 years ago after having been around it in the peripheral, and now you talk about the amount of effort that's required. And you guys only race like two races a year max, right?
One race a year. Currently, one race a year. But you got to remember, we're a couple guys. Brian's a marketing executive, and I'm a photographer. Before I bought this truck, I didn't have a set of 4 inches. I really didn't. I knew how to change the oil on a car, but that was about the extent of my mechanical knowledge. And here we are 10 years later, and Brian and I can take that take that truck down to the frame in a matter of a couple hours. And in fact, just did it before SEMA and put it back together, 2 weeks later when the parts had all been rebuilt. That's one of the good things is when it gets into like differentials and transmissions and stuff, it's nice to be able to lean on, what is a very, very knowledgeable industry that we have access to.
Yeah, but I think what's cool here, and maybe we can clarify for fans of Brian and Boyd, because I dealt with this back in my days of racing. To hear that you guys are taking the thing apart and putting it back together, and granted, you're sending the components off to have the experts go through, but I'm assuming I'm speaking correctly here that you guys are still working on the thing, and it's not something where you're some prima donna that's writing a check for it. You guys get your hands dirty, and that's what makes it cool.
Don't get me wrong. If we could write a check, we would. No, it's a matter of necessity. Number one, first and foremost, like I said, we don't have the resources like some big factory teams would have in different areas of off-road racing, or you have you got guys and they do it. We do it ourselves, and it's a very simple truck. It's a stock Bronco, a stock early Bronco that is pretty easy to work on. Now, what's really good about this is we understand every single nut and bolt on that truck. If something goes wrong out in the field, we're able to diagnose it and switch wires or tighten a bolt or decide that
not only that, Boyd, whether you even realize this or not, and I'm going to throw this out there because I recognized this about myself back when I raced full time and was doing all the work on my own car, because you're taking it apart and putting it together. When you're behind the wheel driving, you can visualize what's happening to those parts as they're moving around. You can visualize what's happening to that wiring loom that you didn't put enough zip ties on, to hold it in place. And I'll tell you, I believe that is don't take this the wrong way. Rob McCachran, those of you that know who Rob McCachran is, he's a phenomenal driver, and he is as professional as they come, and all of those things. But one of the things that gives him an advantage over others is the fact that he spent many decades and still probably could if he had the time, or would if he had the time. But Rob did a lot of his own work on his own stuff, and that really makes a good driver, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that you're right to some extent. When you're driving it, if nothing else, I understand where the link or the weak links are on the truck.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I think Brian, we both do. So when we're driving it around, it's much more easy. It's much easier for us to decide, like, hey, that's a bump we can hit hard. That's a rock we can clear in this this part of the undercarriage, and or hey, that's driving too rough for these many reasons.
Yep.
So you're right, absolutely right. And not only that, but I also understand that we're probably going to have to fix that shit later on once we break it.
And that was part of my deal too. Everybody thought that, lots of people thought, I shouldn't say everybody, that I just showed up with a helmet, and the reality is when I broke it, I had to fix it, man. And that was a big factor in making sure that I drove in a way that didn't break stuff. So, hey, let's like do a full, like, grab another gear and go another direction here. It just made me think of your was it your proposal or your wedding trip or your what do they call it when you run off and get married? My
wife and I eloped. Yes,
elope. That's right, the elope.
Yes, we did. We eloped.
Can we talk about that, or is that too private?
Sure.
Because it was man, what you did was so cool.
And were a bit non-traditional. No.
Well, we had an overlap.
Say that again?
No, I was just going to say what you did makes the average guy that, I mean, I did a crappy job getting down on my knee and proposing to my wife, and we had a nice wedding. But what you did, man, made the rest of us look like a bunch of jerks.
Well, I had proposed sort of a fairly traditional way. If you call getting down on one knee while handing her a glass of wine on the beach in Laguna traditional, but that's how it happened. But we both, in a non-traditional sense, we both didn't really believe in having a big wedding and spending a bunch of money to stand on a cliff somewhere and say our vows. So we decided to do something a little more private, which is funny to even hear myself say that, but we decided we wanted to maybe say our vows to each other in some important places on the earth. So the original idea was to do it at Seven Wonders of the World, and started looking into what it would cost to do something like that. And it was like, well, shit, that's way more expensive than actually having a wedding. So we ended up settling after consulting with a travel agent and getting some nearly round the world plane tickets. And her and I, without telling anybody, packed a carry-on bag, and we had the same outfits that we wore for the entire time. And then I used a 4K Osmo gimbal selfie camera thing, and we filmed ourselves in New York underneath Brooklyn Bridge, in Grand Central Station, in various places around, on the East River.
Iconic spots, yeah.
Iconic spots in New York, and then we flew to London and did the same thing there at Stonehenge. We did it in the Tube and by Big Ben, et cetera, outside St. Paul's. Then flew to Rome, and we actually only had 12 hours in Rome. Locked our bag at the airport, changed into our wedding outfits, the same outfits we've been wearing.
So you were washing them in between, or was it?
No. This entire trip was only 10 days.
Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah.
And so then we took train in center of Rome and did the Trevi Fountain or the Spanish Steps, did our vows there. And, the camera's on a little stick, just standing by itself, and I had to walk away and wonder if somebody was going to steal the damn thing. Right. And all these really, really public places. And then we rode a Vespa around the Colosseum at sunset, through traffic in Rome, which was interesting. I don't recommend that, but it was awesome because that really was the inspiration for the trip. Was an old movie. Now, shit, I can't remember the name of the movie. A famous old movie. Love in Rome, something, or Romantic Rome. my wife's gonna kill me because I can't remember the name of it, but she had done a mood board and was very inspired with our outfits and everything by this mood